Hello. I do not have a PowerPoint with me, so you have to settle with me. But my name is Sandra, and I am here from Denmark, and I do not have dystonia, but my mom has generalized dystonia. So I am not here to speak about my own personal dystonia story, but how dystonia has affected me. My mom had shown symptoms since she was 4 years old, but it wasn't until around 2006, when I was 9, that she was diagnosed. And like many other people with dystonia, it took years before the right diagnosis actually came. Over the years, she had many different medication, sorry, I'm nervous, medication that she did not need, and it has a lot of side effects. So one day when I was in school, she hallucinated that I was sitting in the room with her, sitting at the dinner table, doing homework. And she was 100% sure that I already left for school, and she called the doctor immediately and demanded to stop the medication. And thankfully, the doctor let her gradually step down the medication, but she still was affected for a long time, and afterwards there were new medication. And it was around the time when she was diagnosed that her cramps and convulsion got worse, and she would sometimes cramp up to 4 hours at a time, and it just became more frequent. And it was about that time that the local authorities started to investigate what changes that should be done for our living condition to be the best. Now I'm happy I live in a country where the help does not cost us personally anything. I would not, and my mom would not have been able to afford a wheelchair and all the other things we got if it wasn't for the welfare state we live in, and I am grateful for that, but when things are free, it takes time for the right things to be set in motion. And even though you can meet a lot of realistic and nice people, you can also meet people who are more focused on budget cuts and than the actual need of help. So it took time before the right help arrived, and in the meantime, I was alone with my mom, and she was just getting worse. So even though my mom tried to have a brave face on, it was easy for me to see when she was lying on the floor, cramping in her whole body, being stuck in a door under a bed, that things were not okay, and that she was not okay. She would always tell me to call someone from my family to come help us, and then I would do my homework or computer games in the next room. She didn't want me to see her in pain, but I could still hear her being in pain. The big and long cramps is something I got more used to the older I got. But when I was a kid, I remember I was really scared of them. And even though I do not remember this myself, my mom has told me that I once said to her that if she was going to die, I just wish she would die now. And my mom lost her mom at a young age, so she kind of understood what I was saying, but she was still a bit freaked out. She understood that I did not wish for her to die. I just didn't want her to suffer if she was going to die of her cramps anyway. The thought of my mom dying came from the fact that I did not understand what was happening. In my head, I was seeing her in pain, and as a kid, I just thought that meant she was going to die. So when my mother heard this, she sat down with me and let me explain and ask all the questions that I wanted. And also got to say that I wish she never had gotten me, because then her life would have been easier and she didn't have to take care of me. And every time she would tell me that the reason she has all this energy and the reason she keeps going is because of me. Cheers. Now I have met kids who have parents with dystonia and other diseases, but where it wasn't talked about. It was hidden away to protect the children, and I understand the protective thought behind the action, but the outcome may not be the best. And I think that's the first advice I would ever give to someone with kids who has dystonia and other sickness. Speak to your children. It may seem like you're protecting them, but children see a lot more than you'd expect. And fantasy can be a lot more horrible than reality. Had I not spoken to my mom, and hadn't she told me what was actually happening, I would have gone through my childhood thinking that my mom would die while I was sitting in the living room. Today I don't think that my mom would die, but the memory of seeing her in so much pain is still something I must deal with. Because when she was lying there, even though I knew she wouldn't die, I still felt helpless. And I couldn't take her pain away, and I needed to accept that I never would. I still haven't, but I am better at it now than I was as a kid. My mom also knew this, so she wouldn't let me stay at home, and she wouldn't let me be one of the kids who take care of their moms. So I had a lot of after-school activities, and I ended up neglecting all of them. I would play handball twice a week, and on weekends, I would play drums once a week, and I should have practiced 1 to 2 hours a day. Never happened. I had after-school care every day, and I had to take care of Rapid at the after-school care. And I just wanted to be home, not to take care of her, but just to be home with her. And I know it was a way to protect me, but I think finding a middle way is to make sure that the child does not become the adult, but also can stay in the house. And I didn't feel like my mom didn't want me. It just feels like she was trying to hide how bad she was. What I did appreciate with all this activity was that every time I had a show or a game, she would be there for at least the first 10 minutes. Because my mom can't listen to music, so when I was playing drums, she would cramp. But she used to say that when the music was really, really good, that's when she would cramp the most. So if my mom left while I was playing drums, that meant I did really well. And I don't think that was the truth, but it made me happy and it made it all right for her to leave. So it may have been weird for people, but it wasn't weird for us. Now, I have heard many stories about kids being bullied because their mom or parents is disabled. But weirdly enough, that has never been the case at my first school. It was probably because I wasn't the only kid with a parents who was a bit different. And even though I was getting bullied for a lot of other things, they would never dare to use it as an excuse. But people I met out of school and people I met at new schools didn't have the right mindset. And pardon my language, but I think it was the first time I could really see how people could be so ignorant around people who were disabled. Some of my friends would just stare at my mom and wouldn't answer her. And I don't think it was because they wanted to be mean, they just didn't know how to act around disabled people or people in wheelchair. And I remember it made me think that I was really happy I didn't grow up like that. I could let it go when it was my friends who didn't know what to do because they were kids. And when we got older, no one really cared. What I couldn't let go was when grown-ups acted like a person in a wheelchair was the most exciting thing they have seen in their lives. I cannot count how many times random people would come up to my mom and pinch her toes, usually followed up with, "Oh my God, they haven't put shoes on you," like a child. And this was not young people, it was middle-aged people who would touch the toes of someone they didn't know. And when people did that, my mom would usually cramp, and in the beginning, I would just stand there looking, stand there doing nothing, and just stand there being sad. And I couldn't understand how I, as a child, understood what was right and wrong when the grown-ups didn't. But I got a bit older, I started to understand what was happening. It used to make me so angry when people would disrespect my mom with their assumption that because she's in a wheelchair, she must be mentally disabled. I usually wouldn't say anything to these people because I was so angry that if I opened my mouth, it would just be garbage. And I knew my mom wouldn't want that. So instead, I would stand there not doing anything, and I would stand there being really angry. So angry that sometimes I just didn't say anything the rest of the day. But when I was about 12, and I matured a bit, I somehow stopped being angry. I started feeling sorry for these people who was touching my mom and saying weird things. Because if the most exciting thing you have seen in your life is a person in a wheelchair, you have a really boring and sad life. And I started to think they really needed a hobby to be entertained. I also sometimes thought in my head, my mom is a chemistry engineer, what are you? And I would often mention it in conversation, not because I wanted to be on a high horse or be mean, but it was a way of coping with But it was a coping mechanism to think it, and by saying it, it was a way to make people understand that nothing was wrong with her head. It was just her body didn't want what she wanted. Now years has gone by, and I live in a small city, so it doesn't happen very, very often. But when it does, we just make the person stop, and I think he, she, it really need a hobby, and then we laugh about it. It has sometimes worried people when we have laughed at the most absurd times. We could laugh after my mom crammed for 3 hours, but we did and do not care, because a way of coping with what is happening, especially as a child, seeing my mom making these horrible episodes into something less horrible by joking and laughing, has made it a lot easier to live with what I had to see, feel, and hear. Which is also why I have been that is also why I've been sad seeing some of my mom's friends disappear from her life. She has to put so much laughter into my childhood that I did not see how much it affected her that most of her friends wasn't around. Now I've been on 2 boarding schools, I've been au pair in London, and I traveled through Asia, but I didn't see the effect before I really moved out in my own apartment, because now I did not see her as often, but when I saw her, I could see that she missed having people around joking and laughing with. It made me sad because I realized I knew that it didn't happen overnight. So I tried to push her to speaking with old friends and with new friends, and I can see that it has made her a lot happier and has given her more energy. And I wish I'd done it sooner. I wish I could have pushed her in that direction earlier, and I know it was my responsibility as a kid, but I also know that she would have been happier, and it would have been easier for her to be the smiling and happy mom that I knew she was. With this speech, I wanted to give some advice to people who are in similar situations, things that were helpful for us and not so helpful. So be open about the disease. Don't overdo it, but it's important not to hide it, because we can't expect other people around the world to be open to dystonia if you're not open yourself. And don't make kids the grown up, but still let them be in the house. It's more important to find a middle way. And try not to get caught up in emotion like sadness and anger, because I wish I wasn't so angry as a kid. It would have been much better. And at last, use laughter to overcome your own fears of this sickness, but also for the children's fears. It helps to see parents laugh even at the hard times, because it's reassuring that it will be all right. I hope some of you can use them, and thank you for listening to my dystonia story.